Okay, now we're going to be talking about snares. So again, we've got a blank project. In case if this is the first video that you're watching, I should have already have uploaded the kicks as well as claps as far as this video series goes. So what we want to do first is we're going to turn everything up. You just saw me turn the track up on this, and we are going to hit function mod and turn all this other stuff up, kind of like so. Hit down, turn this stuff up, turn it up. Then we're going to apply our master overdrive to about halfway. You can crank it if you want to, it doesn't really matter, but having at least just a little bit is going to help us out by quite a bit. Okay, so I'm actually going to be using FM tone to create our snare. We're going to be doing some of the similar tricks that we did in the other one, but this one is going to require a little bit more mangling. And the reason why I didn't show this to you on how to make your drums super loud of the very first video that I did is because, as you'll see, there's a lot of finagling that we're going to have to do. Unfortunately, that's just part of the process. So if you need to, you can skip ahead, but you need to kind of hear what I'm listening for whenever we're doing stuff. Now, another thing is that because this FM engine doesn't have a dedicated noise generator, it means that we're going to have to be kind of crafty with the feedback on this in order to get what we're looking for. So before I do any of that, the most important thing is we're going to go into mod and we're going to do the same thing that we did for the kick. I'm going to go into Expo here, go into pitch all, and then we are just going to adjust this with full mix, high BPM, something like this, and set this to something kind of like this. Cool. And then we're just going to set this to trigger. You can kind of hear now with this going on how we're kind of already getting in that territory. But the next piece of this, which is very important, is we need to remove the attack and the sustain. Next thing, I'm going to go to trigger. I'm going to turn the velocity up on this, and we're going to go and set this to maybe A#4. And we're going to go back to the amp, turn the volume up. Now, in theory, we could actually just use this and do a short version of this. Actually, let me just show you that, because in case if you get bored or something, then there's that. But what we can do is go into function filter, and this is going to show us this menu. We're going to go into the track layering. We're going to layer track 9 onto this. The unfortunate thing about doing track layering is that you have to set this up every time, or you have to save a project or a template or something. But I think that it's just a handy procedure or trick to memorize in the first place, because this isn't the only thing that you can do this with. Now with that, let's pretend like we have both of these, right? On this one, what we can do is come into this, and actually what I'm going to do is this. We're going to grab the volume on an exponential layer, kind of like so. On the amp, filter, amp, and we're just going to grab the volume here, and we're going to do our own dedicated thing, because what we can actually do with this is change the phase of this, kind of like so. And this is going to allow us to create an offset snare. You hear how it's going pew, pew, pew. And so within this, what we want to do is we want to go into our synth. We're going to hit function and go into something like FM drone or wavetone. I prefer wavetone. And we're going to come down into this, and we're just going to set the noise level to be at max. Right? We're going to set this here. And so now on this mod, there we go. That should be where we need it to be. Whenever we hit this, this is going to trigger the volume of the amp later. Now, I accidentally messed up because I have a habit of doing this where I'm trying to manipulate one and I'm hitting both. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back off of this just a little bit and go back to the 64. And as you can hear this, right, it's kind of doing its thing. Now, one thing with this though is we need to hit the trigger mode on this and make this a little bit faster. And then the other thing that we need to do is we need to come into the amp and turn this down. There we go. Okay, so coming back into the mod, we can adjust this. See if we can make that a little bit faster. For some reason that's not triggering. Now it's triggering. And we've got a different kind of snare. Sorry, I knew what I was going for. It just kind of took me a while to get there. So if we do a little bit of an offset here. You can come into this, and then we can actually start to play with creating different types of timbres for our snare. Now on this, we can reduce this by just a bit. And as you can hear, we're getting lots of different stuff on here now in order to change this. The algorithm makes a huge difference, by the way, so mess with this. I usually think 7 and 8. These ones, I don't know, for whatever reason, they usually sound the best to me. I say that. Now the next piece that we're going to do on this is we're going to come over into this and we are going to utilize this to help give us a fundamental. So what I'm going to do is we're going to come over to this and we're going to go back into our mod here and I'm going to hit mod, yes. Crap, that is not what I wanted to hit. Nice. I wanted to hit mod and copy. Oof. Okay, no worries. Let's just do this very quickly and maybe try not to mess that up this time. We'll set this back at 0, set this on the retrigger. Yeah, see, no big deal. And we'll just back off of this a bit. There we go. It's like nothing happened, right? So now, instead of doing what I just did, we're going to go mod, copy, mod, paste. But instead of doing this on the pitch now, we are going to do this on the filter resonance. I'm going to hit yes, and then we're going to set this up to be not all the way, but pretty high. And so what we can do on the filter here is find where that sweet spot is, and we're going to push the fundamental up. And by doing so, we can get a much snappier drum sound like that. And then within this, on this guy, we can come into the mod here and just reduce the pitch of it by just a little bit, so that way the noise isn't so prominent. And we've basically got a snare that's layered. Okay, cool. So now that we have that, let's actually go over to this and we're going to kind of do the same thing, but without the layering part. And the reason why I wanted to show you that is because if you put the time into it, you can get a snare that's just as cool without doing it this way. It's just that you, again, have to kind of really finagle with whatever it is that you're doing. So we don't need to start a new project for this. We're just going to go here and same thing. I'm going to go into the mod. Grab this, grab the depth, grab pitch all, and by combining some of the other things here with some of these elements, we can actually get some really cool stuff. We're just going to have to kind of, again, be a little bit crafty with what we're doing. I'm going to change the waveform to something different, make sure that the feedback is all the way up because that's going to give us a noise layer. That's cool. But then we also need to make sure that we're turning the trig on. Set this to 64, set the speed all the way up. And come into the trig here, turn this up, turn this down. We'll do the same pitch because I like this pitch. This pitch. And within this, we can there we go. All right. Now within this, we can start to mess with these other elements here. What we need to do is we need to start introducing some FM. So I'm going to figure out what we need in order to get the noise oscillator in here. Actually, yeah, we can do that. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this and I'm going to set this by a little bit of an offset. We'll say 2. And as you can hear that, we're starting to get into what we're looking for. Now, the only thing that I find to be a little bit strange is why does it sound like that? Because for whatever reason, some synth on here sounds just super chirpy, and that's not supposed to be doing that. Okay, if I come into this, all right, there's that. Expo is 0. Maybe we'll set this at 32. Okay, so you can kind of hear that sounds a little bit basketball-y. And within this, we can maybe crank this up a little bit. See what happens if we do just a little bit of this. That's not too bad. And if we want to, we can even start to adjust some of this stuff, but you kind of just want to be sparing with it. You don't really want to go crazy, but yeah, you can if you want to. But I like doing this sometimes because as you can hear, it'll sometimes give us a more natural sounding snare. Come back to the synth and make this a little bit higher. Pretty nice. And then the rest of this is just kind of a balancing act of how much of this do we add to how much of this do we add. Now, if we change the algorithm, this is kind of be where stuff starts to give us more results. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it doesn't sound so great, but we'll just mess with it and see what happens. As you can tell, changing the waveform does have a huge impact on the sound. So set that at 1, I believe is what we had that at from before. Just kind of showing you some different options and like see how that totally actually ruined the snare. You really have to get in here and like get finicky with it because it's just one of those things that like sometimes it works, sometimes most of the time it doesn't. But if you get that sweet spot with FM, then you'll be like on the right track and you just want to like make sure that you remember your values when something is working and then be able to backtrack if you need to. So that one's pretty cool. Let's work with that for a bit. Let's come up here. That's interesting. And now that we have that, you know, we ended up getting some kind of cool metallic sound, which I couldn't really replicate ever again, unfortunately. We're gonna come into this and go back into the exponential rhythm here, or exponential waveform, whatever. And we're going to set this to be pretty fast. Set this up all the way, set this mode to trigger, and turn this up by a healthy amount. Change this into a high pass filter. And then we just kind of need to balance this out to where it seems like the higher pitch we go, the better it sounds. So there is that. Let's go into the effects. Let's add some overdrive. And then let's see if we can actually get this to be offset just a little bit more. And actually, this is a great point because you see that when they're triggering it at the same time, it doesn't sound nearly as good. But when you offset it just a little bit, sorry, I was just messing with the phase on that to see what was going on. Then yeah, that helps a lot with creating what it is that we're kind of looking for. We can also set this to go down just a little bit. There we go. So now that we found the sweet spot, we can adjust this. Oh, did we forget to do the resonance on this? I guess we did. Sorry about that. Resonance. But yeah, and so with that, we can kind of play with that. And if you really want to get a more natural sounding snare, we'll probably end after this. You can go into one of these ratios here, kind of like so, and just kind of do the same thing to where this pitch is going here, but we're going to make the speed of this a little bit slower. And so what it's going to do is it's constantly going to sound like it's pitching down, and it's not going to land on a fundamental, which I think is really important for drums. I even do that with kicks. Like if your kick is sounding too, I don't know, silly, a lot of times it's because it gets to the fundamental and then that's it. So you have like this really awkward pitch bend and then it's hitting like a bass note. For me, I actually like to make the sound, as long as possible, continue to fall down. And it just makes it sound a little bit more natural, especially with the way that it travels through air and all that other stuff. But having this kind of go a little bit slower and pitching down like that might give us a little bit more of a realistic tone. Okay, so we're going to kind of just mess with this. That gives us a really interesting sound, actually. I actually like this better. So this is a little bit downward, going back up, and that gives us a little bit more of a trash can sound. But as you can hear, like it's like all over the place with the way that the snare is hitting. And so once you have that, like, yeah, maybe give it some space if you want. The thing is like, even though this reverb will save, It's not going to save the reverb settings whenever you pull up a new project, so that's why I generally don't do that. But if I were going to, I'd show you. What we would do is turn off the pre-delay and make the decay down, turn this up a little bit, turn the high pass up. And then just, it gives it a little bit of high end on that. Set that to the post filter. And then, of course, if we wanted to add in that compression that we talked about from before, then we can do that. So we can a little bit of attack, a little bit of release. About a mid threshold. Yeah, the interesting thing about that is that we lose the white noise on top of that, so which I think is a really important part of the sound. There we go. And then we can experiment with just kind of changing some of this stuff. That gives it a little bit more of a explosive sound. It's a little bit more of a classical. Move it over to the right. That's our trash can part. So I think that having a nice balance in between both of those. Although I will say I'm a little disappointed that this isn't as loud as I was hoping that it would be. So let's turn that up. Ah, okay, there we go. And then again, just kind of fine tuning it and adjusting it to where you needed this to be. And whenever you adjust this, I suppose that you can do key tracking on here. So maybe we can go back to the D#5 or something. You can go to the filter here, go key tracking, go reset, and then adjust this with where this needs to be. So let's see if now if we change this, if this keeps the fundamental. Oh yeah, nice. So you see how making all of these adjustments little by little is making the biggest differences within this. I kind of wanted to show you that because you might make one snare and then you're like, oh, I think I can make it a little bit better, and then make an adjustment over this, and then you lose it. And then you take a couple of steps back and then you hit this like sweet spot where it's like, oh, there it is. It's right there. Now, one thing that I'll say within the drums on the Digitone is that no matter what, you can get some pretty loud sounds, as you can see, but it's never going to be as good as like designing it in a DAW or something. That being said, you can get some unique sounds and get some pretty cool stuff, but I don't want you to think that you're going to be like, you know, I don't know, maybe a sound like this, in case if you don't know who I am or don't know any of the stuff that I've done. It's not really going to be comparable to some of the drums that I make inside of Bitwig, kind of like this. Alck, claps, and snare. So something like that. I actually really like that one, so maybe we can make this a little bit shorter and see if we can make that a little bit tighter. Yeah, so the values between the envelopes and the lack of a curvature on the envelopes as well is going to kind of keep you from getting that nice tight sounding thing. You can get them to be just as loud, apparently, you know, with a little bit of that decay here. But yeah, as far as like making them have that nice like, yeah, it's just really hard to get that like really fine tuned type of tail and all that other stuff within that. So hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you had fun, and I'm hoping that the screen was easy enough to follow. We have one more video to cover, which is actually the easiest and going to be the shortest video, and I'm going to be teaching you on how to make both hi-hats and percussive sounds, and it's also the most fun to make. And so make sure that you stay subscribed for that. And if you like my sounds, especially my drums, I've got sample packs and stuff on my website at alckemy.com. I'm thinking about putting out a Digitone 2-pack, but remember that the stuff that I have on here, you're still going to have to adjust per project because you need to make sure to turn on the master overdrive and all that other stuff. But anyways, thanks so much. I really appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one.